I always thought Christmas was the one time of the year where the world seemed safe. No matter what was happening in life, the lights, the music, the smell of cookies and pine, it all made me believe that, at least for a few days, nothing bad could touch me. But what happened one particular Christmas Eve completely shattered that illusion. And even now, years later, I can decorate a tree or hear carolers outside my window without feeling a chill crawl up my spine. At the time, I was 21 and still living with my parents. We weren't a big family, just me, Mom, Dad, and my younger sister, Emily. But every December, we went overboard with decorations. Our house was practically glowing on the block, wrapped in strands of colorful lights, a plastic Santa on the roof, and even one of those inflatable snow globes in the yard. Inside, it was even cozier. Garlands on the banister, stockings hanging neatly above the fireplace, candles burning cinnamon-scented wax on every surface. Christmas Eve was always my favorite. My parents let us stay up late, drinking hot cocoa and watching cheesy holiday movies, pretending we'd all go to sleep early enough for Santa. That year, though, something just felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, nothing you'd call scary at first. It was more like a background hum of unease, the kind you can't explain, but just feel. Around 9 p.m., we were in the living room when I heard what I thought was the sound of something shifting upstairs. My dad paused the movie, frowning, but then shook his head. "Probably the house settling," he muttered. He was always practical like that, quick to dismiss little things. But I'd grown up in that house. I knew what the house settling sounded like, and this wasn't it. This was a slow, dragging sound, like someone moving their feet across the floorboards. Emily noticed too. "That wasn't the house," she whispered, eyes wide. Dad told her not to worry, but I couldn't let it go. I excused myself and went upstairs, expecting maybe the cat had gotten into one of the bedrooms. But every room was empty. I checked closets, under the bed, even peeked into the bathroom. Nothing. Yet as I stood in the hallway, I felt a faint draft coming from the ceiling. That's when I realized the attic door was slightly ajar. Now, our attic wasn't tea-finished. It was just a dusty crawl space filled with boxes of decorations and old clothes. Nobody went up there except once a year to grab ornaments. I remembered Dad closing it a week earlier after pulling down the tree. So why was it open now? I pulled the cord, and the ladder creaked down. The draft hit me stronger then, cold air brushing against my face. I almost climbed up, but something in me hesitated. Instead, I just pushed the ladder back up and shut the hatch, convincing myself maybe it hadn't latched properly last time. For the rest of the night, though, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was up there, listening to us laugh, sip cocoa, and pretend everything was normal. By midnight, Emily had fallen asleep on the couch. My parents carried her upstairs, and I stayed behind to tidy up. I remember standing in the kitchen, rinsing mugs, when I heard it again. That slow, dragging step above me. My stomach dropped. This time, I didn't ignore it. I tiptoed to the hallway, heart pounding, and stared up at the attic door. It was open again. I froze. My parents had just walked upstairs with Emily minutes before. There's no way either of them had gone up there. The pull cord dangled slightly, swaying as if someone had just climbed through. That's when I made my first mistake. Instead of waking Dad, instead of calling the police like I should have, I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and pulled the ladder down. The rungs groaned under my weight as I climbed, every step louder than it should have been in the silence of the house. My breath came fast, clouding in the cold air leaking from above. When my head cleared the opening, the beam of the flashlight cut through the darkness. At first, all I saw were the familiar shapes. Boxes stacked high, a dusty plastic bin full of wrapping paper, an old rocking horse my sister used to play with. Everything looked normal. But then the beam landed on something that didn't belong. In the far corner, half hidden behind a stack of boxes, was a blanket. Not the kind we stored for winter, not our blanket. It was grimy, bunched up like a makeshift bed. Beside it sat a half-empty bottle of water and a paper bag from a fast food place 2 towns over. Someone had been living in our attic. My hand shook so badly, I almost dropped the flashlight. I scrambled down the ladder, slammed it back up, and backed away, gasping for air. My first thought was to tell Dad, but when I reached their room, I stopped. The last thing I wanted was to panic my sister. I told myself maybe whoever it was had already left, that they weren't even here now. But deep down, I knew better. I barely slept that night, every creak of the house making me flinch. At some point, exhaustion won, but I woke just before dawn to a sound I'll never forget. It was the unmistakable noise of someone climbing down the attic ladder. The sound of the attic ladder creaking open above me didn't feel real at first. I thought I was still dreaming, stuck in some half-conscious nightmare. But then I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy. Someone was descending into the hallway outside my bedroom. I froze in bed, every muscle in my body screaming at me to move, but I couldn't. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure whoever it was could hear it. The faint glow of the Christmas lights outside my window cast long shadows across the room, and in that dim light I saw the silhouette of the ladder lowered all the way down. I knew I had seconds to act. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and crept toward my parents' room. Just as I reached for their doorknob, a floorboard groaned behind me. I turned my head ever so slightly, and my blood ran cold. A man was standing at the end of the hallway. He wasn't tall, maybe average height, but the way he stood there, hunched and still, made him look unnatural. His clothes were filthy, layered in jackets that looked stiff with grime. His hair was long and tangled, his face hidden in the shadow. But what struck me most was his stillness. He didn't rush toward me. He didn't speak. He just stood there watching. I pushed into my parents' room and slammed the door shut. My dad jolted awake instantly, but before I could explain, there was a pounding sound, 3 slow knocks against the door. My mom screamed and Dad jumped out of bed, grabbing the baseball bat he kept under the dresser. "Call the cops!" he barked at me. I fumbled with my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. I could barely form words as I whispered to the operator that someone had broken into our house, that he had been living in our attic. While I spoke, Dad pressed his back against the door, gripping the bat like he was ready to swing the moment it opened. But after those knocks, the man went silent. The hallway outside seemed to stretch with the weight of the silence. The only sound was my mother sobbing quietly, clutching Emily, who had woken up crying. Minutes dragged like hours. When the operator told me officers were on their way, I clung to that hope like it was a lifeline. Then we heard it. The attic ladder creaking again. The man had climbed back up. By the time police arrived, the house was eerily still again. They swept through every room, every corner, and finally into the attic. What they found made my skin crawl. The blanket, the water bottle, the fast food bag. I'd seen those already. But hidden deeper in the shadows were more things. A pile of candy wrappers, empty soda cans, and worst of all, a small stack of photographs. They were pictures of us. Some had been taken outside, through the windows, probably at night when we didn't notice. But others were from inside the house. Shots of us eating dinner, watching TV, even sleeping. One of me at my desk, headphones on, completely oblivious. That was the moment it hit me just how long this man had been here. Days, maybe weeks. Watching us live our lives, silently documenting it all. The police told us they believed he had slipped out through the back door before they arrived. They searched the neighborhood but never found him. Whoever he was, he vanished into the cold Christmas morning. We didn't open presents that year. We didn't sing carols or eat pancakes in our pajamas like we always did. Instead, we sat in the living room, blinds shut, the tree lights dark, too shaken to pretend Christmas hadn't been ruined. In the weeks that followed, I tried to convince myself we were safe again. The attic was padlocked, new alarms were installed, and Dad even set up cameras. But no amount of security could erase the memory of that figure standing at the end of the hall, silent and waiting. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I still hear it, the faint drag of footsteps above me. And every Christmas Eve I can't help but stare at the ceiling, wondering if someone is up there again. Christmas morning was supposed to be magical. I woke up that year to the faint glow of lights flickering down the hall, the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen, and the sound of my little brother shaking our parents awake because he couldn't wait another second to open presents. I was 19 at the time, already old enough to know the holiday had lost some of its sparkle. But I still loved watching my brother tear into gifts like every box contained treasure. That Christmas, though, I got a gift I'll never forget, and not in the way people usually mean it. Our living room looked like something out of a postcard. The tree was lit, ornaments shimmering, and piles of wrapped boxes covered the floor. My mom handed out presents one by one, smiling as paper flew and ribbons scattered. Most of the boxes were clearly from her or my dad, but then she passed me one that made me pause. The tag said, "To Alex, from Santa." Now I know a lot of parents will write "from Santa" just for fun, but my mom looked genuinely confused. "That's not from us," she said. My dad shook his head too. "Maybe your aunt dropped it off?" But the wrapping paper was nothing like we used. It was plain, a dull brown with no ribbon, no bow, just a sloppy fold and a tag in blocky handwriting that didn't look like anyone in my family's. Still, everyone urged me to open it. Inside was a small wooden box. No hinges, no latch, just a smooth block of dark wood that felt strangely heavy for its size. When I lifted the lid, something clattered softly inside. I tipped it open and froze. It was a Polaroid photo. The picture showed me, lying in bed, fast asleep. I felt the blood drain from my face as my family leaned in to look. My mom gasped, instantly horrified. My dad snatched the photo, his jaw tightening. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" he asked, glaring around the room like one of us might confess. But no one did. I wanted to believe it was fake, maybe photoshopped somehow, but the photo wasn't digital. It was the kind of instant film camera shot that develops in your hand, and it was unmistakably real. I recognized the sheets, the posters on my wall, even the small scar on my cheek. Someone had been in my room while I was sleeping. We searched the box for anything else and found 2 more photos wedged at the bottom. The second was of me sitting at my desk a few nights earlier, headphones on, completely unaware of the camera. The third made me sick to my stomach. It was of me walking out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, clearly taken through the crack of the barely opened bathroom door. My mom started crying. My dad muttered curses under his breath and said we needed to call the police immediately. But here's the thing. There was no note, no explanation, no sign of forced entry in our house. The cops came, bagged the box and photos as evidence, and told us they'd look into it. That didn't make me feel better. The rest of Christmas morning passed in a haze. My brother didn't even finish opening his gifts because the mood in the room had died completely. I sat clutching my knees, unable to stop replaying the images in my mind. Every shadow in the corners of the room felt threatening. Every creak of the house made me flinch. That night I couldn't sleep. I left my lamp on, but the walls seemed to close in anyway. Around 2 a.m. I heard something, a faint knock against my window. I froze, staring at the glass. My room was on the 2nd floor. There was no way someone could reach it without a ladder. The knock came again. I forced myself to look, and that's when I saw it. Another Polaroid, pressed against the window from the outside. The flash of the streetlight caught it just enough for me to see the photo clearly. It was me, sitting right there on my bed at that exact moment, lamp on, eyes wide, staring in terror at the window. Whoever was watching me had just taken it seconds before. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The Polaroid on the glass showed me sitting exactly as I was in that second, lamp on, hands clutching my blanket, eyes locked on the window, which meant whoever had taken it was standing right outside, in the dark, just a few feet away. I scrambled backward, knocking over a stack of books, and screamed for my dad. By the time he burst into my room, the photo was gone. The window pane was bare, no sign anyone had been there at all. But I knew what I'd seen. We searched the yard with flashlights, combed through the bushes, even checked the snow for footprints. Nothing. Not a single trace. It was like the person had vanished into thin air. The police came again, this time taking my statement more seriously. But they still didn't have answers. They said maybe someone was pulling a cruel prank, that it could be a neighbor kid with a camera. But that didn't explain the photo of me in the shower, or how the person had gotten inside to place the gift under the tree without waking anyone. That night, my dad nailed my window shut. He sat in a chair in the hallway outside my door, baseball bat in hand, determined not to let anything happen again. I managed to drift into a shallow, restless sleep, but sometime after midnight, I woke to a sound that still haunts me. It was the faint click whir of a Polaroid camera. Not outside, inside. I sat bolt upright, my eyes darting around the room. The lamp was still on, but the corners of the room seemed darker than usual, like the shadows were thicker. My dad was still outside the door. If someone had gotten in, they'd done it silently. Another click whir, this time from the closet. My throat closed up. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my chest. Slowly, I slid off the bed and back toward the door, my eyes never leaving the closet. My hand fumbled for the knob, finally wrenching it open. Dad shot up from the chair, startled, and I whispered, "He's in my room." Dad didn't hesitate. He stormed in, yanking the closet door open and swinging the bat, but no one was there. At least, that's what it looked like at first. The closet was empty except for my clothes and a pile of boxes. But then Dad noticed something. The panel in the back wall. It was slightly ajar, just enough for someone to slip through. Behind it was a crawl space that led down between the walls of the house. The police searched the space later and found it littered with candy wrappers, empty bottles, and more Polaroids. Dozens of them. Pictures of me sleeping, eating, showering, sitting at the dinner table. Even one of me brushing my teeth. The worst part? Some of the photos were weeks old. Whoever had been stalking me hadn't just started at Christmas. They had been inside our house for months. After that night, we didn't stay in the house. My parents packed us into the car and drove straight to my aunt's 2 towns over, leaving behind all the decorations, the unopened presents, everything. The cops never caught the man. They didn't even find fingerprints. It was like he had slipped out of the walls and disappeared forever. We eventually moved, but I've never felt safe again. Every creak of a floorboard makes me look over my shoulder. Every time I see a Polaroid camera in a store, I feel my stomach turn. Because somewhere out there, someone has a collection of photos of me. Thousands of snapshots of moments I thought were private. And the worst part is, they still have the last one. The photo of me staring out my window, frozen in terror, as they stood just inches away on the other side of the glass. When I was 17, I worked part-time at a local grocery store to save up for college. It wasn't glamorous, but around Christmas, the place always looked magical. String lights hanging across the aisles, the smell of pine-scented candles near the registers, Christmas music looping over the speakers. But that year, something felt off. It started with the man. He came in a few days after Thanksgiving, tall, scruffy beard, wearing a heavy coat even though it wasn't that cold yet. I remember him because he stood in the corner of the store for nearly 20 minutes, not shopping, not browsing, just watching. Watching me, specifically. At first I thought maybe he was waiting for someone, so I ignored it. But then he came back the next day, and the day after that. Always standing in the same spot. Always staring. By the 3rd visit, I tried to be polite, asking if he needed help finding something. He didn't answer. Just smiled, a wide, toothy grin that didn't reach his eyes. Then he walked out without buying a thing. I told my manager, who shrugged it off and said, "It's the holidays. People get weird. But weird didn't even begin to cover what happened next. A week later, my shift ended late, and the store was almost empty. I grabbed my jacket from the back room and headed outside. Snow was falling lightly, the parking lot glowing under the yellow lamps. I walked toward my car, jingling my keys, when I felt it, that heavy sensation of being followed. I glanced back. The man was there, just standing across the lot, motionless, watching me. I froze for a second before unlocking my car and getting inside as quickly as I could. My hands shook so badly I fumbled the keys twice before starting the engine. When I looked up again, he was gone. I drove home that night with my heart pounding, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. The following week, the gifts started showing up. At first, it was small things, candy canes left in my locker at work, a Christmas card tucked under my windshield wiper with no signature. Cute, if it had come from a friend. Creepy, since I had no idea who left them. Then it escalated. One night, I came home to find a box sitting on our porch wrapped in festive paper. My mom assumed it was from a relative and let me open it. Inside was a snow globe. But not just any snow globe. Inside the glass dome was a tiny figurine of a girl sitting at a cash register. The resemblance to me in my uniform was uncanny. We didn't have cameras at the house, so we had no idea who left it. A few nights later, I was taking the trash out when I saw something sticking out of the snow beside the garbage bin. A Polaroid photo, half buried in the ice. It was a picture of me, carrying groceries out to a customer's car. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight. He had been there, at my job, taking photos, watching me. I told my parents everything and they called the police. An officer came by, but all he could do was take down the details. Unless he threatens you directly, there's not much we can do, he said. That night, I woke to the sound of jingle bells. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, until I realized it was coming from outside my window. I sat up slowly, the room cold and quiet, my breath fogging the air. Carefully, I pulled back the curtain. Standing in our front yard was the man. Same heavy coat, same grin. Only this time, he was holding a string of Christmas bells in one hand, shaking them lightly, staring straight at me. I dropped the curtain and screamed for my dad. By the time he rushed into my room, the yard was empty. No footprints in the snow. No sign anyone had been there at all. For the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. And that was just the beginning. After that night, I begged my parents to let me quit my job at the grocery store. But money was tight, and they convinced me to stay, at least until the holidays were over. They promised to pick me up after late shifts, so I wouldn't be alone in the parking lot. For a while, it seemed safe. Weeks passed, Christmas crept closer, and though I still felt uneasy, there were no more snow globes, no more photos, no more strange visits outside my window. I almost let myself believe it was over, until Christmas Eve. That night, the store closed early. My mom drove me home, the radio softly playing Silent Night. Everything about the drive felt calm. Fresh snow blanketing the neighborhood, houses glowing with colorful lights, kids outside making snowmen. For the first time in weeks, I let my guard down. But when we pulled into the driveway, the calm shattered. Sitting on our porch was another box, wrapped in the same festive paper as before. My stomach dropped. I begged my mom not to open it, but she insisted. Inside was another snow globe, this one different. Inside the dome wasn't a figurine at a cash register. It was a figurine of a girl, lying in bed, eyes wide open. My bed, my room. That was enough for my dad. He called the police again, furious this time, and demanded they send someone out to patrol the neighborhood. They promised to keep an eye out, but deep down, I knew he was smarter than that. He wouldn't just walk up to the house again. He'd wait. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window made my heart race. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again, the faint sound of jingle bells. I froze, listening. It was coming from inside the house. Terrified, I got out of bed, grabbed the baseball bat I kept in my closet, and cracked my door open. The hallway was dark, silent. My parents' room door was closed. And then I heard it again, bells jingling, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps on the stairs. Someone was in the house. I panicked and rushed into my parents' room, shaking my dad awake. He grabbed his own bat and stormed out into the hall while my mom called 911. The three of us crept down the stairs together, the sound of bells getting louder. When we reached the living room, the front door was wide open. Snow was blowing in, and in the middle of the carpet was a single gift box, tied neatly with a bow. The police arrived minutes later, but the man was gone. They searched the property and found nothing. No footprints this time, no sign of forced entry. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. But the gift box was real. Inside was another Polaroid. This one showed me sleeping in my bed, taken from outside my window. That was the last straw. We packed bags and went to stay with my aunt for the rest of the holidays. My dad installed new locks, cameras, even motion sensor lights around the house. For a while I was paranoid everywhere I went, checking behind me in stores, watching cars in the rearview mirror, locking every door and window. But eventually, the incident stopped. No more gifts, no more photos, no more jingling bells in the middle of the night. It's been years now. I've moved to a new city, new job, new life. But every Christmas Eve, when the lights are up and the air smells like pine, I can't shake the memory of that grin, those bells, and the sound of footsteps inside my home. And sometimes, just sometimes when the house is quiet and the snow is falling outside, I swear I still hear them, jingle bells in the dark. Two winters ago, my family decided to spend Christmas at a rented cabin in the mountains. It was supposed to be the perfect escape. No crowds, no city noise, just us, the snow, and a roaring fireplace. The cabin itself was beautiful. Rustic wood beams, a massive stone fireplace, and a view of the forest that looked like something straight off a postcard. The owners had decorated for the holidays. Garlands on the banisters, stockings over the mantel, and a giant tree covered in lights. At first, everything felt magical. We cooked dinner together, played board games, and later gathered by the fire with hot cocoa. But from the very first night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in that cabin. It started small. While unpacking, I found one of the upstairs bedroom doors locked. My mom assumed it was a storage closet the owners didn't want us going into. Fair enough. But that night, as I passed the hallway on my way to the bathroom, I swear I heard whispering coming from behind that locked door. I froze, listening. The whispers were faint, muffled, like two people having a conversation just out of earshot. When I leaned closer, the sound stopped. I told my dad the next morning, but he laughed it off. "Old houses creak," he said. "You're just spooking yourself." I wanted to believe him. But the next night, things got worse. We were sitting in the living room, watching Christmas movies, when the power flickered. The lights dimmed, then came back on. Everyone brushed it off as a storm passing through. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement upstairs, like a shadow crossing from one room to another. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, until later that night. Around 1 a.m., I woke up thirsty and went downstairs for a glass of water. The cabin was dead quiet, only the faint crackle of the fireplace still burning out. But as I stepped into the kitchen, I noticed something strange. One of the stockings had been moved. Earlier, they were perfectly lined up above the fireplace. Now, one hung crooked, as if someone had tugged on it. I stood there, glass in hand, when suddenly, I heard footsteps creaking across the upstairs floor. Slow. Heavy. I froze, staring up at the ceiling. My family was all asleep. There shouldn't have been anyone up there. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath for what felt like forever, before finally creeping back upstairs to my room, heart pounding. I told myself it had to be the old wood settling, like my dad said. But deep down, I didn't believe that. The next morning, we found something that made my blood run cold. Outside in the snow, just below the upstairs window, were footprints. Bare footprints, leading from the woods directly to the cabin, and they stopped right beneath my window. The footprints in the snow unsettled everyone. My mom tried to rationalize it, saying maybe some animal left strange marks in the ice, but these were not animal tracks. They were human. Clear toes, a heel, and no shoes. My dad followed the prints back into the tree line, but after only a few feet, they vanished, like whoever left them had simply disappeared. That day, tension hung heavy in the cabin. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind rattling the windows made us jump. My little sister begged to leave, but my parents said the roads were too icy to drive until morning. We had no choice but to stay one more night. That evening, we all huddled together by the fireplace, trying to act normal. My dad kept his hunting rifle close, while my mom distracted us with Christmas carols. For a little while, it worked. We almost forgot. Until the sound came back, whispering. This time, it wasn't behind the locked upstairs door. It was inside the living room, faint but distinct, like someone was speaking just beneath their breath. My sister heard it first, clutching my arm and whispering, "Do you hear that?" We all went silent, listening. The fire popped, the wind howled outside, and then, clear as day, a voice whispered, "Let me in." We bolted upright. My dad grabbed the rifle and scanned the room, but no one was there. The whispers stopped as quickly as they had started. We tried to convince ourselves it was our imagination. But later that night, when we finally went to bed, the real nightmare began. I had just started to drift off when a loud bang shook the cabin. I sat upright, heart hammering, as my dad's footsteps thundered down the hall. I heard him yell for us to stay in our rooms. My mom rushed into mine and my sister's room, pulling us close as we listened. Another bang. This time, it sounded like it came from the front door. Then came the sound of bells. Soft, jingling bells, like the kind you'd hear on a Christmas sleigh. But they weren't cheerful. They echoed through the cabin like a warning. My dad shouted, "Who's there?" But no answer came. Just the sound of bells, moving slowly around the house. We huddled together, terrified, as the jingling circled the cabin. First at the front door, then the side windows, then the back. Whoever it was, they were walking the perimeter, dragging those bells with them. Finally, everything went silent. My dad stayed up the rest of the night, rifle in hand, watching the windows. None of us slept. At dawn, we packed our bags and left the cabin as quickly as the icy road allowed. When we returned the keys to the rental office, my dad told the clerk what had happened. The man just sighed, like he'd heard it all before. "You stayed in cabin 6, didn't you?" he asked. My dad nodded. The clerk leaned in, lowering his voice. "You're not the first. People say a man froze to death out there years ago. Got lost in a storm and never made it back to town. Every winter someone hears him, sometimes sees him, always barefoot, always asking to come inside." We didn't say a word on the drive home. To this day, none of us talk much about that Christmas. But every time I see snow on the ground, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see those bare footprints behind me. And sometimes, when December rolls around, I swear I can still hear it. The faint sound of bells in the dark, moving closer.